Greetings, everyone, and a very warm welcome to Addis News Hour. With the news, I'm Shifara Alako. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, along with several higher officials, launched the 6.7 billion Bir Adam Awash Expressway project. The construction of the 60-kilometer-long project, which is a part of the Grand Ethio-Djibouti Transport Corridor, is financed by the Africa Development Bank. Ethio-Djibouti Transport Corridor accommodates over 90% of the nation's import-export activity. At the launching ceremony, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed reaffirmed government's commitment to intensifying efforts in line with scaling up irrigation dam projects in order to ensure food security. Ethio-Djibouti and Ethio-Sudan electric power transmission line will be built soon, the Premier disclosed. Ethiopia will play an important role in integrating the region through power supply, trade, and other socio-economic activities, and demonstrate its amicable, unwavering stance in realizing mutual benefit among countries of the region, it was noted. Now, Addis Ababa residents have called on foreign forces to refrain from intruding into the country's internal affairs. In a huge mass rally they held Sunday, the residents have denounced the inordinate interventions of both the U.S. and its allies in Ethiopia's domestic affairs. Demis Mokra has more on that.
Ethiopia's capital, Addis Ababa, has witnessed a mass rally under the theme Voices for Freedom, which openly denounces the interference of foreign countries and organizations into Ethiopia's internal affairs. African solution for an African problem. We need the U.S. to reconsider its stance on Ethiopia. We will never surrender for external pressure are among the slogans the demonstrators resonated at the rally. During the event, Addis Ababa Bureau of Youth and Volunteers Coordination Head Abraham Taddese applauds the courage demonstrated by the youth in denouncing international meddling into internal affairs. Abraham underlined that the intrusion of foreign forces into Ethiopia's domestic affair is based on TPLF's unfounded propaganda, which undermines the actual context and situation of the law enforcement operation in Tigray.
በተሳሳተ ግንዛቤ በተዛባና በተቀናበረ የሚዲያ ዘመቻ የሚይዙትን የተሳሳተ አቋም እና ውሳኔ እንዲፈትሹ ይጠይቃሉ።
The youth here demand both internal and external forces to refrain from their evil acts against Ethiopia. The youth further demands United States and its allies to reconsider their stance about Ethiopia, which is based on a coordinated yet set-up propaganda.
Speaking on the event, President of Ethiopian Patriots Association, Lej Daniel Joti Mesfin, called upon citizens to stand united so as to triumph over foreign enemies of the nation.
ዛሬ ያላችሁት ወጣቶች በተለይ ማንም ይምጣ ማንም ሉዓላዊነታችንን ማንነታችንን
We will never surrender to anybody so long as it comes against our sovereignty. We will never let anyone attack our dignity, no matter what it may cost us.
Addis Deputy Mayor Adanech Abebe allows the city's youth for coming out in big numbers to openly oppose external forces' improper pressure against Ethiopia. Citing Ethiopia's history of independence, the mayor underscores that Ethiopians never concede on their national interest in the course of the time.
Meanwhile, Ethiopians who staged protests against foreign meddling in the internal affairs of the nation have expressed their determination to defy any foreign interference. They gathered at the Addis Ababa Stadium on Sunday, exhibiting the passion of the youth, carrying slogans that depict their message to the whole world. Daniel Kasaun has compiled their views as follows.
Welcome to this grand rally of Ethiopian youth to condemn the intervention of foreign forces in our internal affairs and accompanied by the youth to have their voices heard for their country, dubbed Voices of Freedom and Sovereignty.
በአጠቃላይ በሀገራችን ኢትዮጵያ ላይ እየደረሰ
Foreign powers are imposing sanctions against Ethiopia. We, the youth, are opposing it. It's unfair. We want their hands off from the domestic affairs of Ethiopia. Ethiopia will never accept any foreign interference.
አሜሪካ ኢትዮጵያ ላይ የጣለችውን እንትኑን እንድትና
We demand the United States of America to leave the sanction it imposed on Ethiopia. It is undeserved pressure of foreign powers. Their steps have never considered the objective realities in the country. We are duty-bound to protect the country of our parents.
ዛሬ የሚገርም ነገር በቃ የነበረው ድባብ ከሚገመተው በላይ ነው።
The vibe we had today here was beyond expectation. All turned out here under the banner of national unity. As you all are aware of it, the very purpose of the demonstration is to stand against the sanction imposed by the United States administration on Ethiopia.
እያንዳንዱ ጉዳይ ወደ ኢትዮጵያ የሚጠቁሙ እጆችን ኢትዮጵያ
Each and every finger's pointer to Ethiopia should be turned down. It is the nation's responsibility to defend the sovereignty of the country. We don't allow any foreign interference. We want the United States to reconsider the imposed sanction on Ethiopia.
እቺ ሀገር በአባቶቻችን ደም የቆመች በአባቶቻችን ደም
This country has come to exist with the devotion of our parents. This young generation is responsible to pay sacrifices for its loyalty. Ethiopians from time immemorial have been paying huge sacrifice to form this country. Now it's our turn to defend its dignity. I believe that our unity will be strengthened more to maintain coexistence of the people.
Hi, my name is Brooke Thomas Haftweld. I was born and raised in the UK. I do not like what the Egyptians are doing to Ethiopia. This is my dam.
It's my dam.
It's my dam.
It's my dam.
It's my dam.
It is my dam.
It is my dam.
It's my dam.
Now, moving on, the recent sanctions imposed on Ethiopia are said to be a well-planned part of the conspiracy that has been hatched up to frustrate the reform programs and the upcoming 6th general elections in Ethiopia. The full story by the Ethiopian news agency is presented as follows. Despite the efforts that are underway by the government and various relief agencies operating in the country, Western media outlets and some of their representatives in Ethiopia repeatedly issued fabricated reports to discredit the massive relief and rehabilitation programs that are in full swing in Tigray state. Furthermore, in spite of the fact that the government of Ethiopia is already cooperating with the UN Human Rights and the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission to investigate possible human rights violations, rape, and other forms of crimes by deploying law enforcement bodies composed of the Federal Police, the ENDF, Office of the Attorney General, the current government of US has continued to accuse Ethiopia of not delivering relief supplies and even obstructing such efforts. In its analysis, the Ethiopian news agency indicated, unfortunately, by interfering into the internal affairs of a sovereign country, the sanctions put a rubber stamp on tarnishing the century-old relations between the peoples and governments of Ethiopia and the USA. The sanctions put the general security situation not only of Ethiopia, but also the entire region of the Horn of Africa, paving the way for terrorist forces which Ethiopia is fighting on its own accord, with its army and as a member of the AMISOM peacekeeping force that is commissioned by the African Union. The sanction imposed on Ethiopia is aimed at forcing the government to act only according to the desires of the U.S. interest in the Horn of Africa, Besides, the determinations exhibited by Ethiopia, Eritrea, and Somalia to jointly coordinate their economic and social development by them did not fit into the U.S. political interest in the region. The U.S. also used Ethiopia's efforts to ensure the rule of law in Tigray as a propaganda tool and pretext to intervene into the internal affairs of the country. The U.S. sanction is also a reminder of the Wuchale Treaty, in which Italy tried to trick and trap Ethiopia in its own political ambitions of colonizing the country. The U.S. deliberately chose this occasion to create a ground for attempting to disrupt the peaceful conduct of the upcoming election in Ethiopia, thus creating total chaos in the country. The government of Ethiopia is not a messenger in the service of the U.S. government, as some leaders in the region do, but is only accountable to the peoples of Ethiopia. The peoples of Ethiopia may have different views and outlooks on so many issues, but they should fully support the government's efforts in ascertaining the unity, sovereignty, and territorial integrity of the country. By issuing sanctions on the leaders and the entire country, the U.S. has also put the security and stability in the Horn of Africa at risk by providing safe haven for the resurgence of terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda in the region. Scholars in social sciences infer that the sanctions issued by the U.S. are not based on solid evidence, but on misinformation and distortion of facts on the ground in Tigray. It is also interesting to note that the sanctions never mentioned atrocities and genocide-level massacres conducted by TPLF in Maikadra, Humera, and adjacent areas. The Horn of Africa is already a volatile region with economic and political and geopolitical ramifications. There are unstable governments in the area, and the presence of branches of ISIS, Al-Qaeda branches in the area, and Al-Shabaab has been there for a longer time. There are also unsolved regional issues. Ethiopia has been a stabilizing country in terms of fighting terrorism in the region. The sanction on Ethiopia exasperates an already shaky political situation in the area and would also severely harm U.S. interests in the Horn of Africa. Ethiopia has always assisted U.S. comprehensive interest in the Horn of Africa, and the sanction itself is against the basic national interest of the U.S. in the region. Ethiopia is immensely contributing to ensuring the formation of a stable government in Somalia. The sanctions also affect AU-USA relations, as it is intended to weaken Ethiopia, who is the founding member of the AU. The sanctions disparage Ethiopia's decisive role in East Africa and opens the door for expansion of terrorist organizations in the rest of Africa, jeopardizing security and stability in Africa. All told, the U.S. sanctions on Ethiopia is self-defeating and would never subject the peoples of Ethiopia into socio-economic humiliation that the U.S. has masterminded, but would only do a disservice to U.S. interest in Africa.
በሀገራችን ሰው ታሞብን ቀብረን ነው የምንጽናናው።
መቼም አታገኛል።
ትሰማኛለህ? ይቆያል እንጂ ባሪያም የገዢዋን አህያም የጌታዋን ቤት አትስትም። እሷም ማምሻዋን ታውቃለች።
አህያ
Oh my gosh. Oh my god. That looks amazing.
And I'll bring the injera on the side. All right?
Perfect.
Laida babo, oradista gine, goze babo, ima gois.
Welcome back. You're still watching this News Hour. Some seasoned Ethiopian politicians commend the country's sixth general elections procedure, comparing it to the previous 5 elections under the TPLF regime. They say they are hopeful that the election will be free, fair, and democratic. Sintayv Tamrat reports.
There are only few weeks left for Ethiopia to hold its sixth national election. And the country's seasoned politicians say the procedure so far has been democratic as compared to the previous elections.
The election is taking place in a more or less widened political space. This is not just a propaganda. I can tell the media. There are a number of private television and radio stations and individuals, organized groups, political parties. Their views have been freely expressed. That was not possible in the past. That's a major achievement. In the past, the electoral board was totally controlled by the ruling party. All those who served in the electoral board were elected by the ruling party. So more or less, the electoral board was another extension of the ruling party, but not anymore. No.
The National Election Board is now an independent, autonomous body. It is no longer part of the party structure. In the past, members of the National Election Board were more or less under the ruling party. Currently, they are an independent body. Save for, barring logistical difficulties and presence in all parts of the country, I think this body would conduct a free and fair, hopefully, a fair election.
While the previous elections of the APRDF were one-party dominated elections, the current one is different.
Under the APRDF, in theory, it was a multi-party system, but in effect, it was a one-party state. So the one party ran in the election and then it was voted in, just like it happened in 2015. In 2015, it ran and then swept 100% of all seats in the federal parliament. Okay. So in name, it was a multi-party election, but in effect, in reality, it was a one-party rule throughout the country. So that is the difference.
Andargacho also mentions this election is to be conducted while the country is facing different external challenges.
This is different from the others. One, it is being conducted in a country that faces a number of challenges. There are challenges from foreign powers, the sort of challenge that is being raised, by countries that had no business to interfere in Ethiopian business, like the Americans and the US, the UK, and the Europeans, and at the same time, those countries that have interest in the filling of the GERD, the Egypt and Sudan.
Wageni mwakaribishwa Kenya yetu, hakuna matata.
Longolongo nyingi.
The name again. Mawenzi. Mawenzi.
Now in our continental news, now that the Al-Shabaab insurgency